Hunt for the Fallen Star, Chapter 14, Moon Landing. The descent to the moon's surface took longer than their escape from Earth's atmosphere, but it was smooth and controlled. Casey took his time as he felt every movement of his hands interact with the controls while he navigated based on the 3D displays floating over the consoles. The ship soon came within view of the surface. A mountain range dominated the horizon. The ancient ruins of a facility jutted from the base of an expansive cliff, and the squared corners of destroyed buildings dotted the rise to the cliffs. The two wrecked spacecraft lay near the foothills. Within an elongated crater, centuries of weather-deposited debris covered the twisted remains of a large cylindrical object. A couple miles away, smoke poured from gashes in a newly crashed spacecraft. Sections of the hull had been sheared off, and large tears mangled the outside as if the lunar surface had ripped through the ship's skin like the claws from a giant beast. A winding strip of green spun out from a small valley north of the cliffs and snaked out into the lowlands before disappearing. Across the landscape, shadows stretched with its fading daylight. Forests in different hues and intensities of green spread across most of the upper regions of the mountain range, and the lengthening shadows cast new saturation levels. Below the mountains, the foothills reached into the surrounding lowlands where dominant barren browns mixed with harsh rock outcroppings and splotches of grays and blacks. Small hills haphazardly sprung from the brownish ground and revealed layers of reds, oranges, and yellows. Random expanses of greens sprouted up from the landscape, giving the impression of a giant alien golf course spread among the wasteland. Further south of the mountain range, the lowlands showed geologic activity. In the southwest, rocks and minerals of reds, oranges, and browns had spewed out from small craters that were scattered haphazardly across the wilderness. Among these craters were bulged domes of sediment deposits, and steam lazily rose up from the openings of the dome's tops. To the southeast, columns of eroded red-brown stone marched across the desolation like an ancient army frozen in time. Casey approached the old ruins from the east as the lowering sun painted reds and oranges across the horizon. He circled the two crash sites slowly before he descended further. Casey passed near the newer crash. Interesting. What? Asked James. The two ships. Except for one being a much older wreck, they seem similar. Maybe the same people who attacked us also attacked that facility, suggested Layla. Heather's gaze was fixated on the landscape. I thought maybe your interesting was the illusion of greenery on this moon. Looks like most of the green, at least in the lowlands, is actually from various minerals that exposed to the atmosphere. Except for maybe in those mountains, there doesn't seem to be much vegetation. It may be hard to determine how old anything really is. Casey's fingers caressed the orbs. Now we'll see if I can actually land this ship. Try not to bounce down the runway like you did on your first airplane flight, teased James. Casey watched the displays while he brought the ship down. There was a slight wobble near the ground, but it settled quickly. The others watched curiously through the bottom view screens at the approaching ground. When the ship stopped, and the cabin area brightened. Did we land? Asked Layla. Casey turned in his seat and announced, Welcome to Terra Luna, or whatever the moon is actually called. Sorry about the wobble. I was trying to figure out the landing gears. Heather's brows rose in admiration. Still, nicely done. I didn't feel a thing except for the wobble. Not bad, especially for a first-time landing of an alien spaceship, said James. He stood and walked towards the back of the room. Heather looked out the view screens at the surrounding area. I hope we don't end up dying because the atmosphere is poisonous. James and Casey grabbed their packs. Casey paused and looked at the 3D terrain views hovering over the consoles, then followed James and Heather to the door of the boarding room. A small green-hued screen glowed near the doorway. James touched the screen, the door slid open, and he walked into the room. The rampway was still sealed shut, and another green-hued panel faded in and out on the wall. James touched the small screen. Heather panicked. Wait! How will we know if the air is safe to breathe? The ramp descended and extended. James stood at the top of the ramp as warm air rushed up. He inhaled deeply. Then he started coughing and choking. His hands clutched his throat desperately. He dropped to his knees and rolled on his back, his face turning red. Heather stepped into the room and kicked him in the thigh. I can breathe the air too, you know. James smiled mischievously and sat up, rubbing his thigh. I should have gone through on my own and closed the door behind me. By the way, the air seems fine, maybe dry. It kind of has a salty taste of like being on a beach. How do you know it was safe? James shrugged. I didn't, just to guess when the lights were green. I figured they'd probably be red or something. Or maybe I wouldn't have been able to open the door if the air was much different than what's in the ship. James walked cautiously down the ramp and stepped onto the ground. His footsteps made a light crunch as they broke through a thin top layer of browns and blacks speckled with yellows. He looked up the ramp at Heather. Kind of reminds me of the cryptobiotic soils in southeastern Utah, like what we saw on the camping trip out near Dead Horse Point. He took a few more steps, looked up the ramp, and added with a sly smile, Hopefully I don't get in trouble from a ranger or environmentalist for walking on it. Heather and Casey walked more cautiously down the ramp. They watched James sprint 30 feet and jump. He cleared 3 vertical feet and landed 8 feet away, stumbling in the crusty soil and rolling into a heap. Heather's head shook. What was all that about? James got up sheepishly, brushed himself off, and tried to act like the fall was planned. Well, I was hoping to fly through the air in a giant leap for mankind, but the gravity's not much different than on Earth. Casey stepped off the ramp and looked around. Large blackened patches littered the ground. Random strands of yellowish grass poked up through the soil. He had landed the ship so the aft was pointed towards the mountains, the effectual eastward orientation. The older wreck's carcass jutted out of a crater a little to the south. From their altitude, the charred remains of buildings in the foothills had appeared like jagged rock or black rock outcroppings. Among the building debris were corroded and mangled remains of machinery, vehicles, and other mechanisms. Scorched sections on the cliffs were burned out scars from the explosions. At the base of the cliff, through the remnants of walls, a darkening maw gaped, its ragged edges urging caution to the curious. In the opposite direction from the cliff, about a mile in front of the fallen star, the reddish sky of fading day looked like a ghostly fire filtering through the smoldering smoke of the massive new wreck. Longer than 3 ocean liners, the crashed ship's bottom was flattened to the ground and buried by its impact crater. The lower and mid-level sections were smashed into the upper levels, such that the ship was only a quarter of its original height. Surprisingly, the top and bridge sections were intact, except for a side missing from the bridge. Casey kicked the ground and stooped down to look. Small black chunks of crusted ground had broken away in powdered sections. A mild, reflective quality of the powder had caught Casey's interest. The closer inspection revealed black, glass-like flecks that reminded Casey of fine obsidian napping that he and his brother would sometimes find in backcountry hikes, the remnants of an ancient Native American's effort in crafting an arrow or a spear point. Heather noticed Layla still at the top of the ramp, looking anxious. "Are you coming down?" Heather nodded stiffly and walked down. When she stepped off the ramp, she glanced cautiously at the newest wrecked ship smoldering a short distance away. Casey squinted at this still bright but fading daylight. "I want to look around, but I'm not sure how much time we have. On Earth, I'd give us about 3 hours before dark. Here, I have no idea. We've got 2 choices. First, we can call it good for a day, go back inside, take an accounting of what we have, and head out as soon as it's light. And maybe decide where to start looking," added James. "We have the ruins in the cliff, which is probably where our best bet for water is, and the wreck from today where we might find food. The question is whether we divide up into 2 groups or go all together. We'd cover more ground quickly going in 2 groups, but it's probably safer together." Heather nodded at James. "You 2 know I like a good adventure, but since we really don't know what we're getting into, I'm all for safer." Layla tried to keep from fidgeting. I think that safer is a better option as well. The other option, especially since we all had a late nap, is to take a short exploratory trip before it gets dark," Casey said. "Again, probably best to stick together. Maybe even keep one person here to keep the lights on if needed. I'll stay, volunteered Layla without hesitation. James bit his lower lip and thought for a moment. With the fires in the wreck, I'd recommend we try the ruins first. Looks like it's less than a half mile, and if the ground is like this all the way, we could probably get there in 15 minutes or less. That doesn't sound too bad, said Heather. Hopefully we can find some water since we're out. Casey, maybe you should stay too and try to figure more things out with the ship, offered Layla. That'd be a good idea, except I don't want to fiddle around with anything unless we're all inside, just in case something happens like going back on Earth. I wouldn't want to leave anyone behind and not be able to get back. Besides, I'd like to look around as well. Well, then, if you guys are set on going, said Layla, and if nobody minds, I'd really rather prefer to stay with the ship. I tolerated the jungle, but I don't really like the idea of wandering on an alien moon. James clutched his pack strap. Sounds good to me. We'll plan to be back in about 2 hours, 3 at the most. Hopefully that's before dark. Don't open the ramp for anyone except us. Okay, said Layla, except I don't have a clock. I left my phone back in the tent, and, well, it probably wouldn't work here anyway. My phone's in my pack, said Casey. It needs to be powered on. The clock should work. But I should probably put it in airplane mode so it doesn't scan for networks. I'd hate to get overage charges from here. Casey unzipped his pack, pulled out his phone and a small plastic water bottle, and handed it to Layla. Here, it's not much, but with some luck, we'll find more water to fill the bladders with. Layla graciously took the phone and water bottle. James raised his brow at Casey and Heather. You two ready? With affirmative nods, Casey, James, and Heather began their short trek towards the cliff ruins. As they walked away, Casey looked back at the fallen star. The mercury-like skin of the ship had adapted to the environment, refracting colors and shading around its surfaces, giving it the illusion of invisibility. Only a slight distortion, almost like a mirage, and Layla, standing at the lower ramp, revealed the exact location of the ship. He made a mental note of the location in relation to the scarce landmarks, then turned his attention to the approaching cliffs. End of chapter.